Welcome to the UNBC Forestry Club Podcast. This podcast is recorded at the Seaford radio station on campus from the traditional unceded territory of Clayton Tenay. You're probably listening from other places in BC or Canada or maybe around the world. We encourage you to recognize the traditional territory you get to learn, play, and live on. All right, welcome back, smart people. So today we have a extremely special episode prepared for you today. Not just all the gentlemen sitting in this room, but this might be possibly the very last episode of the UNBC Forestry Club Podcast. I've been trying to find people to take over this whole thing, but it's a lot of work and it's a lot of commitments to make before and after recording. So hopefully someone can take over from the club, but if not, I totally understand. So this might be the very last episode. That's why it is special. And today I realized, Ryan, you were on this podcast for multiple times, but I never properly introduced you. Sometimes I just roast you from the get-go. And do you want to just tell people who you are?
What more of an introduction do I need?
It's just like who you are, what are you taking? What's your plan?
Yeah, my name's Ryan Patterson, originally from Ontario. Took the Fleming College Forestry program with the transfer agreements here with UNBC. Came out to UNBC and I'm in my final semester of the Bachelor of Science, Forest Ecology and Management with a minor of Operations and Planning.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Nice, like co-host. And then we also have Dexter, Hodder, and Dr. Roy Ray. I don't know your name, just sometimes it's hard for me to pronounce. I don't know why.
It's a weird last name.
English is my second language, but welcome to the podcast. This is such an honor, and we're so lucky to have you to join us for possibly the very last episode. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. So again, for everybody to come up, we always want to learn a bit about yourself, and then probably start from Dexter, and then like how do you become who you are, and then what do you do, and then who are you?
Who am I? So I work with the John Prince Research Forest now. I've been there for 24 years. So I've been working there quite a while. And my background is a little bit diverse. So my undergrad was in natural resource management, really focusing on not just sort of the biology side of that, but the people side of that, a lot of human dimensions work, that sort of thing, and then a master's degree in wildlife ecology. So fit all that together, and I do a lot of diverse work in sort of the intersection of forest management, communities, and wildlife communities, and looking at how to manage forests better for all of those communities.
And that's what we want to learn more about from you. And then, Roy, for all the other professors, please cover your year. My favorite professor at UNBC.
Jeez, Linda.
I like starting from biology 103, 104. And then I had you then in plant system. I had you in animal physiology field school. I picked animal physiology solely because you're teaching it. I'm the last one to pick animal physiology because when down to the cell level and how hormones and everything works, and I'm just like, But
I think you're the only forestry student I've ever had in animal physiology. So thanks for coming.
And he could be the last.
No, it's a really good course, so please take it. So again, how do you become who you are, and then what's your focused research, kind of that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I got an undergraduate degree in biology from California State University, and then came to UNBC right when the doors opened, actually the year after they opened the doors here on the main campus in 1995, to do a master's degree in wildlife ecology and forestry with Mike Gillingham. Then after I finished that degree, I got a job here as a senior lab instructor and started working as a senior lab instructor, and in 2009 started a PhD program in Norway and finished that in 2014 in ecology. And then 2 years ago, I got converted from a senior lab instructor to full-time faculty member.
Right.
I was assistant professor and then got promoted last year to an associate professor. So I've been on campus since 1995 and have been gainfully employed in the Faculty Association since 2000. And I met Dexter in 2001, so just the year after I started.
24 years.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Because I can tell you guys are your buddies. You guys are so close. How do you guys met? Like, what was... Do you still remember day one, how you guys made eye contact? And you're like, wow, you're the one.
Oh, I do.
We're going to be friends for 24 years.
It still gives me the chills.
We both had hair back then.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine that?
I'm picturing long flowing shoulder length.
At one point it was like that, but not when Dexter and I met. We were more respectable looking then. But as I remember it, I met Dexter at a community meeting in Fort St. James because I had started a research project at the John Prince Research Forest, which I think was the first research project there on a road where they were looking at some access issues. And so Sue Granger, who was the manager at the time and who just retired last summer, had asked if I would come start this project. And I was at a community meeting, and then she introduced me to Dexter. And I think we probably had some conversations there. We hit it off right away.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of other things going on in that meeting, but we just decided at that point, look, we've got some field work, and he comes from a background with being in the woods lots. I came from a background of being in the woods lots. And so we just said, let's go do some field days together. And that was it. We really connected and hit it off and have been doing research projects and teaching field school ever since.
Is that true, that story, Dexter?
Is that true? is that how you remember it?
Yeah.
That whole time I was trying to make up the real story. No, that's right. I think we sort of had that first meeting, and then we had this small project that Sue had wanted to look at, which was a real management-focused project, but intersecting management and wildlife ecology. And we spent a bunch of time in the field and started some of those early research projects on the JPRF.
That's awesome. And the reason why we sit down here, we want to spend some time talk about this field school. Field school, I think many people agree that, before we took field school, first of all, it's required at UNBC. If you take forest ecology and management degree, it's required for you to take it to graduate. And then us, Ryan and I, and many students were transfer students. We came in with this mindset of, field school. We had tons of field experience. I was a field supervisor. I do layout for a living and stuff like this. And so we tried everything I could. I literally tried everything I could. I wrote letters to Emily. I wrote letters to Ken. I wrote letters to whatever, just trying to get out of this program. And I still hear people talk about this. Some of the courses I'm taking right now that people have to take it in the future, they're kind of complaining about this. So this is a very common theme for field school. And then you accept the faith that, okay, you're going to take it, and then you go take it, and then completely change your, whatever you were thinking about field school. And then many people after you take the field school, and then they would tell you that that's their favorite class ever taken at UNBC. So I just want to spend a little bit of time, and then maybe let's just stroll down the memory lane, and then let's go back to how we started, and then maybe back to when you first took over. Like, what was field school at that time? And then what is this same with like what we have right now? Is this the same structure, same everything?
No, it's definitely evolved over the years. But I remember specifically when I was hired at UNBC to be the forestry lab instructor, that they asked me in the interview, would you mind taking control of field school? Because up to that point, they had grad students and sessional instructors teaching the field school, and they needed somebody in the faculty association that would just take that and run with it. So I remember saying to them, well, Dexter and I have been teaching the wildlife and fisheries module for field school.
Okay.
Well, so this is when. So I'm getting a little bit mixed up here in my dates, because I remember them asking about that when I got hired in 2000, but I didn't meet Dexter until 2001. So there was 1 year where I did it alone, where I was teaching the wildlife and fisheries module. And they were transitioning out of having that as a sessional instructor, doing that every year, to eventually having that turned over to myself, and because I had met Dexter and he got involved in the second year, I said, absolutely, Dexter and I can do this. And neither of us were officially trained in forestry, but both of us had been around it a bit, and I had watched the forestry field camp instructor do it for 2 to 3 years, and I said, I know we can do this. So it was a little bit daunting, and I'll let Dexter tell you what his impressions were, but I just remember I was still pretty young. I wasn't trained in forestry. I had some ideas, and I'd worked in the forest industry a bit, but boy, have I learned a lot over the last 22, 23 years that I've been doing this. And I feel now like I'm at the point where I really feel comfortable teaching field camp. But if you had asked me in 2003, it was still a little scary, because you had a lot of people coming that had come from transfer schools, but that had also worked in industry lots, and they had a lot of experience. And most of the ones back in those days that had tons of experience, they were able to write a letter and get a waiver from taking field school. So it was mostly the ones that didn't have as much experience, but in many cases they still had more experience, for instance, in layout or cruising or whatever than I did. So we just had to be honest, and we just had to be humble and say, we recognize everybody here has areas in which they're better than other people, but let's all learn from one another. And so we kind of facilitated it, but we had a lot of fun doing it, and we've learned lots over the years. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. I'd worked in forestry a little bit, did some cruising, layout, that sort of stuff. So I'd had some foundation there, but it was that process of facilitating the course. We never pretended that we knew had all the answers or knew all this stuff, and that was part of it, to be that kind of collaborative learning program. And I think when you say you thought you knew everything, right, coming into the course.
Yeah.
We from a teaching perspective, we assumed that you knew a whole bunch. So the way we tailored the course wasn't to repeat a bunch of those technical skills. It was really to take the course to a different level and bring in and learn in the field, but at a more conceptual level, and how to apply some of that knowledge, right? It wasn't just how do we collect data, it's what do we do with that data when we collect it.
I don't know if you agree, Ryan, but like I field school, this field school they're very minimum about like technical skills that you learn from this. It really is expose students with perspectives in forestry, which is extremely important. And
like you said before, I was also one of the students who was vehemently against having to do field school. And we talked about it on an earlier podcast where I admitted that I ate those words and that opinion afterwards, because it did become one of, if not the favorite course that I've taken at UNBC. Again, because I came into it thinking I've been in the industry for a while, I've taken all these courses, what else could there be? And it was probably one of the most informative week and a half that I've had the pleasure of doing at UNBC. So I said it then, and I'd say it again, like, to all the students who are listening, I know, I get it. I understand your complaints. I had the same ones, money, summer, all that. It's well worth it. Well worth it to go.
It's nice to hear, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that we really relied on that students didn't get coming into it was that a bunch of that technical, because there's some students in the class who don't have the technical skills that you guys might have had. And we were really relying on people like you to do peer teaching within your groups.
Nice.
And it works really nicely. But then you also realize that there's people in the groups who have perspectives that you don't have. And so that within group peer learning is a very deliberate part of the course, and I think a really valuable part of the course.
I think another thing that people may not realize that haven't taken field camp or looked into it at all is that Dexter and I do relatively little teaching. We really, as he said, facilitate the course. We bring in professionals from the forest industry. We bring in guide outfitters. We bring in people that run open range cattle. We bring in all kinds of people that are the experts. We don't pretend to be the experts. We're just trying to bring everybody's perspectives together and allow everybody to learn from one another, and just kind of keep it real and make sure the vans are running and people get fed and those kinds of things. So as Dexter mentioned, we don't ever suggest that we are the be-all, know-all, end-it-all. We're going to teach the whole thing because we know it all. Just like you, as students who may have come in thinking you knew it all, every time I show up to field camp, every year I learn new stuff. That's why it's so exciting, because even though there's a lot of the same instructors that come every year, they have all had something they've learned over the year, and they bring that to their module. And then all of a sudden I'm learning new things, and I'm blending that with new things that I've learned over the last year too. So it's always new.
Yeah, and then the structure of this field school, I don't know if back in the days is the same, but so we kind of starting with different modules, like you said, with different professionals from different fields, and come in and tell us how they want the forest to be managed. And at the end, we have like a case study. We basically pick a block at JPRF, and then we go out and do recce, and then come up with a plan, and then develop a plan to harvest it. And then was it like that from the beginning? It was like a case study, use everything you have learned from field school, put it together, and then put a plan together.
Yeah, I mean, that was the intent. I think it got a lot better as the years went on, right? We got better at kind of facilitating that discussion through the process, but that's the way we designed it, was that we'd have these modules where we'd learn specific things about specific topics, and that could be around, something very specific like birds and forestry, or it could be indigenous perspectives, or it could be any number of topics. And then we would try to kind of pull that together in the end into a really a nice condensed case study. We got a lot better at that over the years, right? We weren't great at it from the beginning, but we were learning along the way. So, but that structure was there from the beginning.
And then you actually use our plan, and then actually use it to log your some of the blocks in JPRF. Is that right?
I get some fantastic, very cheap labor out of you guys, right? So, no, I don't know if we could look at blocks and go, okay, because, each group comes up with a different plan and a different perspective.
Yeah.
But there's elements of that in that harvesting when we do it, right? Because it's like the students think about things that I don't think about. And so you have these ideas that when you're designing that block and you're really trying to think about it, even if you're not looking at that map, I've watched you present it. We've had those discussions about it, and it's just part of your knowledge about that block going forward. So it always creeps in.
And we did one last summer. Do you have a plan of actually how you're gonna do that, like in that block that we did as a class?
It's not finished yet, but that's our block for next year.
Right.
So we'll be looking at that one for sure. So then I pull out the maps, right? I take pictures of everything you guys present, and then we pull that out as a really nice base to start planning the block with.
That's awesome. Maybe since we're here, might just start talking about like JPRF a little bit, and then kind of make people understand what is JPRF, because I think everybody in the natural resource sector or Faculty of Environment at UNBC know what it is, but many they don't. They don't even know what it is. Jump Prints. So what is Jump Prints Research Forest? And then where is it? What does it do? Any cool project going on?
Lots of cool things going on. Always. No, the Jump Prints Research Forest, pretty unique research forest. It's co-managed with Indigenous communities and UNBC, and has been from the beginning. So first with Glasden Nation and UNBC, and then Binche, Wooten, and Glasden and UNBC. So there's 3 partners in it. And so I report to the board of directors made up of those partners. So that's who drives the sort of management and research perspective for the JPRF. And it's a pretty big land base for a research forest. We're 16,500 hectares, so a pretty sizable landscape, so big enough to have a landscape level perspective, but small enough to get your head around.
Right.
And we did a lot of community-based social research in the beginning for a decade, really trying to understand what the partners wanted from the JPRF, like what was going to be our purpose, and we wanted the partners to define that. And one of the things that became really evident and really important was that they didn't want us just thinking about forestry in terms of trees. They were really, really concerned about wildlife health, wildlife habitat health, water. So all those other perspectives or values in management, which really informed what we do in field school, right?
Right.
Back to our previous conversation. So
Yeah.
at the time, we've set up a very sort of deep and robust long-term wildlife monitoring program. So we do a lot. The bulk of our research right now has been wildlife research, but lately with some things like you mentioned, the adaptive silviculture trial, and a few other things, we're really building in some of that. But our management perspective is sort of this real adaptive management. So we're doing research, we're doing monitoring, we learn things. As soon as we learn things, it gets rolled into management.
Yeah, I went to, actually before I went to field school, I went to the GPRF with one of my planning forester for the company that I worked for that summer, and then we took a tour before field school started, and because we wanted to just explore how we can do this on a bigger landscape and kind of use it in the real world. Excuse me. And I just remember I also made a video about field school. I love it so much. I kind of want to document it so people can myself even get on there and watch it sometimes, and brings back some of the really important topic to keep you thinking a little bit more. But one of the points she brought up during the trip with me and the planning forester is we're having this clear trend in forestry that when we talk about forestry, we don't talk about trees, only about trees anymore. It's about multiple resources or objectives, and I just think in forestry that when we hear a lot of sustainable forestry, but back in the days I think a lot of people talk about sustainable forest timber supply. You think about forestry, it's essentially it's just like a tree farm, with this farming mindset and prioritizing the timber values, and then a lot of other things just being ignored, up till recently, I would say, and that field school really fuels. It's a very strong message for forestry students that when you think about trees, timber is an important topic. It pays the bills, it supports the communities and whatnot. But there's so many other things you need to think about. The things the trapper care about, the things they trap, and then the guy outfitter care about their business and the First Nation peoples and all those. So for me, it was entire field school and what you guys doing at JPRF it's a really, really cool thing, and I'm trying to find ways to make more people to know, and then just how we can do this at a bigger landscape, and then also profiting from the forest.
Yeah, I think we've been having some real success in that front. I think if you look across the landscape, at least in some areas, certainly in our region, you're really seeing that translate. Lots of licensees are incorporating a lot of these values into forestry now, and sometimes being pushed along, but sometimes really wanting to dive in and do things differently as well. Yeah. And one of the ways we've always tried to communicate, and it's not a new idea, and certainly not ours, but this sort of to really think about what you want to leave behind. So this conservation-based forestry.
Yeah.
So what do you want it to look like post-harvest? Not looking at those other values as constraints, but identifying what you want left behind and then figuring out what you can take, right?
Yep. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, the word constraint, we talk about this in field school. I brought it up when I met with the Deputy Chief Forester. We talked about the planning constraints, and we all agree that that's an outdated term, because constraints, you use the term constraint because you only think about the timber value, but you think about integrated resource management, that's not a constraint, it's just part of it. So just want to make a comment on that. It really is not a constraint, especially we used to think about First Nation consultation as a constraint as well. I think people can agree at this point, case law statutory requirements and everything that it tells you that's not a constraint. That's just how we do business right now.
I think foresters should just remove the term constraint from their vocabulary.
To kind of add on and slightly jump back a little bit, I want to kind of highlight the fact you said that for the first decade, it was mostly social research you were doing in the partnership and what everyone wanted. With the changing atmosphere of forestry in BC and with a lot of what it's seeming to be going to a lot, tenure is shifting more towards First Nations woodlot licenses and whatnot. A lot of the partners, licensees and stuff might not have the time or the resources to invest a decade into creating, like, into doing the research of the relationship like you guys might have had. What was some of the biggest challenges, or what is some of the best advice you could give to students like Henda and I who are going out there and we're going to be possibly pioneering some of these relationships? What's the best advice you could give to us?
Well, I think it's a very different world now than when we were starting this, right? So you don't have, just like ecological research, you don't have to do the same research everywhere over and over. There's some general truths that come out of that. But I think it's just really being accepting of different perspectives, you know. If we only have a tree farming perspective, you're going to be disappointed by a lot of things. So you're not really open to new ideas. So it's just being really open to that. A lot of your generation are going to be working for First Nations forestry companies. Lots of opportunities out there. So I think it's just being open to a different way of doing things, open to having different perspectives in management. But I think a lot of that is already like getting done at a higher level now. So there's going to be different level plans that you're actually implementing rather than thinking about it, we need to do this, start from scratch all the time. There's a lot more work that's been done now and a lot more leadership in a lot of the First Nation organizations. That work is, it's not reliant on you as a forester to go out and do that. It's to be willing to participate in a new process.
We have this provincial-wide, brand new planning framework, the Forest Landscape Plan, that everybody talk about. Is there a thing is there one being developed around Fort St. James, around JPRF? That's you have to sit down and kind of engage with pretty much everybody, from government, from conservation people, the First Nation, to the industries. And is there a plan happening around Fort St. James that I know?
It's being talked about.
Okay, let's just leave it.
No, I don't know. I mean, we're slightly out of that sort of licensee circle. We're sort of a different organization. But there's a lot, like the leadership from the different First Nations, sort of, they're really driving that process. And I think, and there's different models out there with different communities, and we'll figure it. I think there's still some uncertainty how a planning process will fall out. Yeah. And that's okay, right? We need to figure it out.
Yeah. We had Minister Forest sit down right there at that chair and then ask them this first forest landscape plan, because that's initiated by the government. And in BC, we have lots of very unique challenges to do that in BC, which is, if we have more than 200 First Nations in the province, and then we have this overlapping claims between nations, and some of them have very divided land management objectives. So these are extremely sensitive topic, and then so I brought it up, not thinking he will answer, but he actually answered. Like, he made a really strong message that the government is going to be really engaged with all nations in those tough conversations, because you hear people talk about maybe the role of government is not take a huge step back, let the nations kind of handle themselves and then figure it out themselves. But this minister is trying to get in those super tough conversations, which is really kind of inspiring, in my opinion, anyway. But
it's really complex, right? It's really, really complex.
Yeah.
But at least we're having the conversations now.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be afraid to have conversations.
No, and the conversations, what's really interesting about the John Prince, and we do have field camp at both UNBC's research forest. And in fact, we used to have part of field camp down at the Quesnel River Research Center. But the first few days, as you know, are at Eliza Lake, and then we go to the John Prince. But one of the things that the John Prince has always brought to field camp, in addition to the multitude of things that it brings, is that it's always been co-managed. And so imagine students 20 years ago taking field camp and learning about co-management. What? Who else was doing that, right? And so a lot of the students that graduated from our program and took field camp 20 years ago were maybe 20 years ahead of where a lot of other people were in terms of thinking about co-management.
That's one thing about field school. Like a lot of instructors, they all, they used to be your grad students, and they used to be a TA, and then
it's
they
beautiful.
Used to, yeah. And then to come back, and then kind of the tables turn, and then they showed us what's going on.
Well, I always say to my students that the day when all of the modules are taught by former field camp students, that's the day I know I can retire. And it's getting close, because we have a lot of the modules that are taught by former field camp students, and they're happy to come back and do it, and they do it year after year.
And you're taking a sabbatical. You're not doing this coming year, hey, this summer?
That's right. I'm not teaching field camp this coming summer. I'm leaving it to my partner.
Do you have what are you going to do with your sabbatical? Like, do you have a plan? What are you gonna
not teach field camp?
That's awesome. Only
the
Dexter,
sole reason for sabbatical. No.
What's your plan of this coming field school season? Is it going to be roughly the same kind of?
Yeah. I think we're not gonna. I mean, every year Roy and I get together and go, we should shake it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that's more for our point, to do that. And there's certainly always things you'd like to change or try or spend a little more time on things. But this year we'll, the JPRF staff will take the lead on delivering the course this year, and we'll see how that flows. And then as we go forward, I think there's, opportunity. Roy and I talked a little bit about this. Are we at a different phase now where students come in with a different skill set than they did 15 or 20 years ago, right?
Right.
And being a little more open to some of the concepts, which wasn't always the case previously. So, do we spend more time in the field? Do you spend more time on your case study? Do you collect more data and make decisions with those data? So there's always different things to try and figure out if we want to do things a little bit differently. But I fundamentally don't think it's broken. So so I don't think we want to shake it up too much.
No, for me, I definitely very enjoyed it, and then I will, I don't know if people find it annoying, but I have lots of questions during each module. I will literally ask questions till shut the F up. We got to move on. We got to go to the next module. We got to know. One more.
I may or may not have heard comments of students saying that you and I need to stop asking so many questions.
Or they need to start asking more.
No, I get it. It's just because sometimes you sit there for 3.5 hours, and then you just talk for, take break here and there, but sometimes you talk for 3.5 hours. It's fun for me because, I like doing that. I'm doing this in my own time. I love asking questions and learn all these things. It's interesting for me, but there are many people, we all say forestry student, we're all a bunch of introverts with ADHD. We can't sit there straight, sit there for 3.5 hours. We just start jiggly, think about other things and
But that's the beauty about field camp. You're not sitting there, right? You're out in a jet boat going up the Bowen River, or you're out at the Tezeron Lake. You're walking trails, or that's the beauty of it. You don't have to be sitting in a lecture hall somewhere and just having somebody tell you what to do. You're engaged. And actually, since you're talking about it, and both of you are here, what's your big impression? I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your big impression from field camp? What's the one thing that you're going to, Ryan, you too, what are you going to walk away with?
Ryan first.
Or you can think about it. You can think about it and tell us at the end. But it'd be nice to hear from you two. What's the big impression?
I guess I have lots of impression, but the biggest one is just, I've mentioned this multiple times, is just the complexity of forestry. Everybody wants different things from the forest. People see different things from the forest. I came from industrial backgrounds, and I came here with layout cruising background. So when I'm popping in the woods, I see volume. I can very easily estimate the volume and timber like healthcare, block health, and then what kind of volume you can get out of this, and how you can safely, efficiently get the wood out of the bush. So I came in with that, and then we had like biology students come in here. They instantly start seeing the like habitats for different things. Like that is good for this, and that is good for that. That's for bat. Our guild was small mammals. They teach me how to find bat habitat underneath those balsam bark and stuff, and then that's a cool thing that I learned. It's just how diverse in forestry perspectives and how people see different things from the same thing, which is the forest. That's my biggest takeaway.
It's not rocket science. It's more difficult. Pretty much what Henda said there, just the fact that it's a lot more than just finding fiber. It's a lot more than cutting down trees. It's the whole multi-value approach. And as my university career progressed, it just became more and more prevalent that this isn't just about the trees. It's about seeing the forest through the trees, right? And seeing that change is also happening out in the field. Recently, I got to do a tour of a block that my crew had laid out. The loggers were there, and I actually heard a logger talk about how upset he was that the only place he could put a road was where there was the most advanced regeneration. He was upset at the fact that he had to cut down the regen. He was upset that he couldn't preserve it. And I kudos to them, but that's not something I imagined your stereotypical logger would say, right? So just that multi-value approach is happening, and it's being recognized.
Good. That's good to hear. And hopefully the other thing you learned, in addition to all of the different diverse and myriad perspectives of all the people that we met with, is that you had to be part of the small mammal group, or you had to be part of the ungulate group or the mesocarnivore group, and that you saw the forest not just from the perspective of a guide outfitter or somebody that runs open range cattle, but also from the perspective of a bat or a moose or the marten that has to inhabit that forest that you're hopefully leaving behind after you've made your entry and allowed a few trucks to leave with some wood. And I think that's something that the John Prince and Eliza Lake do really well, is they're not making big, huge clear cuts. They're leaving lots behind. They're taking something, but they're leaving lots behind.
Yeah, but I think that's sort of why we exist too, right? Is to push boundaries and try things and figure things out. But then our responsibility is also to learn how to communicate that to industry, which we've done a lot of over the last 4 or 5 years, where we're bringing loggers out and we're bringing industry forester out and government foresters and First Nations, and sometimes they're all in the same group, which is even better. And you're really trying to talk through these objectives together and then understand and give somebody an impression of that. I think the logger you just described is a lot more common now. It really is not just seeing it. I mean, they're running a business. They need to get wood on a truck and not lose their shirt on that. But we have several loggers we work with who really bought into that and have sort of got this real conservation lens now. And they're really proud of what they're doing.
I think if traditional forestry maybe start back in the 80s when the clear cut starts in BC, at least in around this part of the country, there's a momentum of that all the way till nowadays, even though there's a very clear trend that we need to make changes. And then I always think of taking the evolutional biology, we think about the biological fitness and selection pressures and whatnot, and this is exactly what it is all about. There's a selection pressure that we need to make change, that we need to start do a better job to think about those biodiversity values and ecosystem service and whatnot, and then you can either fight against those selection pressure and then find ways to fight it, or find a way to adapt to it. Once you figure it out with adapt to it, you're going to have the highest biological fitness. You're going to have the highest probability to survive and then keep doing your business and, in this kind of environment. So that's just how I view it. It's just things are changing. People want different things from the forest. What we're going to do as the forest communities. Fight it. I get it. But we should always also find ways to kind of get together and then how we can do to adapt to this kind of environment, and then not to save, just keep save the planet, save the environment out of the conversation, right? This is the saving the forest community themselves. This is just whoever can figure out a way to survive in this environment, you get to live. Otherwise you're just in the history book. That's just how I view it. And
change is always really difficult and inevitable.
Yeah.
So we're going to do those things. I think now, loggers or licensees have had to accept that, hey, if I'm not willing to do things differently, I'm probably not going to get permits very easily. And that then drives that change. So some people do it really willingly. Others might get dragged along, but that's okay. You still get to the same place, right?
You should really make a video out of this. Like all those animal footage that Lauren showed us, and then even just all these new things that you guys are doing. I think as a scientist society, we're doing a great job researching stuff, writing things, but we kind of doing a poor job turning it into something that normal people can understand, and kind of using those things that you found, and then how do we apply them more in the real world? I think video was one of the better ways to make it entertain.
If only we knew somebody who was interested in that stuff. Eh?
I mean, I can do it. I honestly, I can do it no problem if I'm still around here.
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things, both for management and particularly research, is communicating the results of that. It's really it's complicated to get your message out there.
Yeah.
What we've found the most effective recently is we've gotten to a place where we have a lot of research outputs, but we also have a lot of places on our landscape now where we can demonstrate what it looks like in the field, and that really makes the point. The natural sort of, to put that to a bigger audience, would be your video component, right? To take it and then go to the next level to expand your audience.
Yeah, I think is essential, and it's actually part of one of the suggestions for the local growth strategic review back in 2020. One of the suggestions, some people, I'm not saying I am, but some people should come up with a way to turn those super complex scientific journal article into easier to understand content. So is normal people, right, where like people without academic backgrounds can understand and then apply them in real world. And that's why we trying to do this, and then talking to scientists and researchers and doing in different fields. And this podcast, the idea of doing this, it's actually started at Roy's office. I don't think you ever told me.
I didn't know that.
You didn't tell me to do this, but I was trying really hard to do a debate. I was trying to.
You were. I remember that.
I was trying to organize a forestry debate, because we just hear different people either advocating for conservation or advocate for development. It's two completely separate, different language they're speaking, and they don't talk to each other. And then they talk around each other and demonize each other and point fingers. And so I was just trying to find ways to get them to talk to each other, and then the students can learn something from it. I thought debate would be a good one, but again, we're living. It's just too sensitive to do that, like face-to-face debate. And then I thought about, what? Podcast is a great platform. We can sit down for like an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours and 45 minutes, whatever. And then we can jump into some of the very sensitive topics. And then I can even though like guests themselves not, you know, debating each other's, but I can bring some of the perspective from other guests, find a way to politely bring it up to the guests from different perspectives and then get their thoughts, and then hopefully people listen to this can expose themselves with different opinions too, which in my opinion really is an extension of the field school.
Good.
It's just part of it, you know. But again, it starts from Uncle Roy's office, and and then after a year now, we have this. I think this is going to be the 21st episode, and
wow, good for you.
Thanks. And then actually, the FPBC magazine they recently did a interview, and then they feature this on their magazine as well, and we have all kinds of people from Conservation North of up here, and then we have the researchers and the people advocating for industries, and Kofi from the government, from Minister of Forest, and then we're gonna have Chief Logan come up here, and it's people are taking this podcast is going to somewhere. So again, if somebody want to take this over, please
somebody step up to the plate.
Yeah, please, just keep conversation going. It's so important in forestry.
Well, since this might be the last podcast, tell them what you've gotten out of it. How has it benefited you? What have you learned?
I've learned so much. I almost want to write a thesis on this, like with all the things I learned from this, and then hard lessons I learned from technical to initial communicating with the guests, trying to just make sure to understand what we're trying to do with this podcast. We're not trying to get anybody. We're not trying to challenge anybody. We're not trying to embarrass you or put you on a hot seat and then roast you. Even when we're trying to cover some really sensitive topic, there's a way we can communicate very calmly. Make sure you're comfortable, like whatever you say. So I send them out with the questions list. Not other than this one. This one I was gonna roll with just whatever. We're just having a talk, having fun kind of thing. But normally I would send people a list of questions, and just so they're comfortable. In terms of what I learned, I really probably back to that complexity of forestry is just I think many people pick other major than forestry because they don't want to be part of this. They have this idea of what forestry is. I always trying to convince people to, even you're into biology, into conservation, you can still do forestry. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is, if people care about the mesocarnivores and then it's doing this, they will have better knowledge to find those habitats and then, to protect and whatnot. And just, there's just so much I learned from this, and then I think I need a little bit of time to digest.
But that's what the next person that steps up to the plate that takes over from you can learn too.
Yeah. I started having people to come to us and say, hey, can we come out to the podcast and talk about stuff?
Great.
Instead of me reaching out. So this, we need something in the forestry community in BC to facilitate the conversation. And again, anybody want to take over, it's best to do it as a student.
Yeah.
And because you just learn from other people. There's no conflict of interest and stuff like that. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we're appreciative of you doing it.
But again, thank you for starting from 104. There's so many times I just, because I think about these things at night and then having a hard time sleep sometimes and then just get overwhelmed. I just go to Uncle Roy's office and then start talking about this, and then I just feel better. You definitely inspired me to do this, and then so big shout out to you. So
that's why we're here.
That's awesome. Just a couple more questions about JPRF, and then there's an Ask trial, right, happening there. Adaptive silviculture, climate change. Big shout out to Che for running that thing and then do a whole bunch of research on it. What do you have initial finding of how different animals react to those 4 trials in asks and, from transition, what are those 4? Transition, transformation, trend, whatever. Do you have any?
We can remember them. Transition, transformation. What were the other 2?
Clear cut. No. Oh, Chase going to be really upset.
I'm not bailing you out either.
You can edit this out of the podcast. You don't have to have this part.
It's okay.
Resilience.
Resilience.
And adaptability.
You guys.
Resilience.
Resistance. Transition. Clear-cut control.
That's what I meant.
That's what we said that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Roll back the tape.
88%.
Yeah.
88%.
We don't have. We've got a couple of students that are working on some of this. Karis now is working on birds and small mammals in there, and we have cameras running in there continually looking at sort of mammal community, but we haven't really analyzed those data yet. But there are certainly impressions with looking at the retention in different treatments and just seeing which species are still there post-harvest. So when you have something like the transition treatment you're talking about, and then which is pretty heavily harvested, like that's a pretty small amount of retention, 5 square meters of conifers, but you're maintaining, because of the way it was treated, you're maintaining some of what we thought were old forest species, right?
Yeah.
So we're seeing a bunch of that. We still have a bunch of the mammal community in there. We're seeing marten and fisher and moose and other things in these things. So it's actually informed a lot of the blocks we've done since, where we can take some of that, see those results that aren't in a place yet to be rolled up into a student thesis or a research paper.
Right.
But we know that we have confidence in the results, and we can take them and apply them somewhere else.
Right. Because right now I have this feeling of just thinking about all the episodes I've done in the past, and then this might be the last one. You have this mixed feeling come up, and it's like, darn it. I wish I'd just take a grasp, do a master's degree and then keep doing this. And
You can.
I'm the worst researcher you can never find on this planet Earth.
Doesn't matter. You got a fire in your belly. That's all you need.
We'll make the videos about the research as long as other people do the research.
Yeah, we talk about it. But
How old will you be 3 years from now?
36.
Okay, at 36, you might not have a master's, or if you do a master's, 3 years from now, be 36 with a master's. Do the master's. Unless you've got to pay off the bachelor's, and then you better get to work for 3 years.
I do. Well, I'm lucky enough. I'm not in debts for those, because I just have lots of saving from forestry work I did before that. Which is another reason I appreciate forestry, because without that I wouldn't support. I'm probably in debts right now with all the loans and stuff. But maybe in the future I come back and then do a master with. Well, I heard you can straight up just do a PhD as well. I don't know if I want to do that.
You can. Unless you're self-admitting that you're not a research type, and then that's probably not recommended.
No. Yeah, I just
do the master's.
I heard masters you have to read like a paper every day and ish.
If you're with
both the giggle, so that's not true, I guess.
No. If Dexter and I are your supervisor, it's 4 papers a day.
Definitely no.
You could do it.
Yeah, it depends. You don't have to. You keep learning. When you finish your undergrad, you've just learned how to learn. You don't know everything you need to know for the rest of your life, and I can't think back to sort of at the end of my undergrad and going, I thought I had a lot of answers at that time. Well, I didn't know very much. Most of your learning gets done after that, but you're so much better prepared to learn, right?
Right.
In talking about research, part of the degree requirement is doing an undergrad report, and I've just finished putting mine together. But one of the biggest challenges I faced in my undergrad report was finding relevant, accurate, up-to-date data about forestry and forestry-related topics. Mine was a little more all-encompassing. It was, again, more about a multi-value approach to deriving an economic evaluation of a forest. And very quickly in doing this research, I found that there was not enough research to be done. And that if I wanted to do this, I could have even turned this into a PhD thesis in and of itself,
Sure.
right? So how much research opportunity is there available through the John Prince, through the Eliza Lake for students? Because I don't think, and it could have just been for me, and I'm not sure if it was the same for Henda, but I don't know if the research potential was ever stressed to me as an undergrad student about the research potential available to us if we were interested in research. How available is it to us as students through John Prince and Eliza Lake?
Well, I'll just speak for John Prince, but we have lots of undergrad students that do projects with us, and we have a lot of sort of master's PhD students who do research, but there's only so much capacity in terms of supervising students. You only take on enough that you can do it well, hopefully, right? So, but in terms of data available and questions available, it's almost limitless, right? But there's lots of things you can do. But it is a good, Roy and I think are similar here, that an undergrad thesis, if you're unsure if you like to do research or not, that's a great place to learn whether you want to go and do further research, right? There's not a lot of risk, and there's not that much investment, but you can do some really valuable research at an undergraduate level for sure.
Which one's harder, being the researcher or the manager for GPRF?
Research is easy. Management's
It's hard.
hard. Management's hard.
Did someone just say research is easy? Research is
that's
not easy.
That's the easy part. Yeah, you just get a question and go find an answer. No, they're different, right? And they, I'm really, really curious, so I love the research side too. But it's really, really satisfying and rewarding to be able to take the outputs of that research and apply it.
Right.
So that's the application is your management, and it's really great. It's a pretty unique situation to be able to do research and do the management too, and apply it to management. Right. That's a pretty cool opportunity.
It is, and yeah. Again, I just want to say this one more time, that what you guys do in JPRF, all those trials. And then for people that are kind of working in the forestry sector in the northern BC that's so used to clear-cut blocks, you go there, you actually, just like you said, you're leaving a forest behind, keeping forest in forestry, and which is ironically, that's what they've been doing in Europe for so long, and that's what they've been doing in Ontario for so long. It's different forest. And that's actually what they did in Wisconsin. One of my projects I did is single tree selection, and then I learned so much about single tree selection, how they developed. It's because they used to just, again, clear cut their land, or they call it IU log, or they call it the exploitative logging, to just take out the big trees and stuff like that. At some point, public is like, this is enough. I think back in 1920 something, I remember reading. But at some point, it's just the pressure was so strong, and then they had to find an alternative way to keep logging alive. And then they come up with the single tree selection, adopted from European, I think, friends in Germany at that point started this, but Wisconsin was the first guidebook developed in North America, and then kind of Ontario take over, and then I
think one of the things to remember, though, is just because you're leaving some trees behind doesn't mean you're managing really well for other values. When you're doing really intensive silviculture, that is kind of the definition of tree farming, right?
Yeah.
So it's quite complex. They can be very different things. You could be leaving trees behind, but you might not be doing a real service to that ecosystem.
100% agree. But the hard part is, I think even some of the conservation values, there's still conflicts between them, because if you think about ecological niches, and some would thrive in openings, some would thrive in thicker forests, some would thrive in between, in different structures and different service that the forests provide. And I don't think there's a silver bullet that you can say this is good for biodiversity. It would say this kind of harvest system is good for biodiversity in this stand, and then might be others. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm just saying things that's in my brain that might make sense. Do you agree with those?
But no, I think any time we choose one tool and think we're going to get all the answers, we're mistaken, right? So we want some diversity of types on our landscapes, and in order to achieve that, you have to have a diversity of management approaches. And so it doesn't mean that every opening is a bad thing, but we don't want openings everywhere, and we've got a pretty good sample size of that kind of management approach right now, right? Post mountain pine beetle. So I think what we want to do is what's right for that site, what's right for the ecosystem, and sometimes that's a partial cut, and maybe it's a combination of smaller cuts or whatever, but I think it's just having a diversity of management on the landscape so that you're leaving something behind for all those species that have real niche requirements.
Including lots of land that you just don't touch, period, because there is a need for that as well.
100%. We keep hearing people saying this 3-zone method. It's an old topic people have been talking about, but recently this is like the zoning. Basically, you have 3 zones. One's like completely protected, no touchy. One is intensive forestry management, silviculture. That's all the forestry techniques, and there's one in the middle that managed for multiple values. We hear people talk about, Michelle come here tell us that we should do this. We talk about Kofi, the chief economist. He said we need to do this. And then one thing I haven't had the chance to bring that up is to bring up to the decision makers and politicians or the policy writers or whatever, because they eventually can put them into law. But I didn't get to ask them about the zoning idea. But essentially, just we need to have some places that we just need to be completely protected. But I do hear other voices saying that if you conservation, we typically think about conservation. We draw a circle. This is whatever, we want to protect this. We don't touch it. But the
fortress conservation.
Yeah, but right now we also hear arguments that we need to think about what kind of attributes we need to protect from this conservation land designation, because sometimes leaving them in, just don't touch it. Obviously, this is opinion, right? Not be right. Might be wrong, maybe right. It's not the best approach, because you can still go in there. Let's example. Some of the mule deer winter range down at the Williams Lake. Then, it's Ungly Winter Range is a government legal land designation saved for mule deer, but fire gone through reburn. They completely burned down the entire thing. What kind of value we're leaving for ungulates for mule deer? So that's the argument of we should still perhaps do some active management. So that's the term, active management, to think about what kind of attributes we were trying to protect in those land designation, using management to achieve those conservation efforts. That just one opinions, right? Again, this is a complicated field.
Yes.
So people's going to agree and disagree. So I just want to bring that up.
But again, I think it's really important to realize that those arguments, those opinions, those voices that you're hearing are all from one species on the planet, and there's a lot more than one species on the planet. And so people can sit around and argue and debate and say this is what we want and this is what we need and this is what we'll take. But if people had never evolved to be where we are and have the control that we have over the planet, what would be best for the planet? So I think we need to factor that into the balance here, because there's 10 million other animals and there's millions of other plants and fungi that probably would suggest it's best you stay out of these woods, regardless of whether it's it's prone to fire or not.
Right.
So it's fun because a podcast is getting human voices and opinions projected, but we don't get to hear from the moose and the marten and the mallard. And so somehow or another, we need to leave a seat at the table for them as well. And for future generations who aren't here to represent themselves right now, I think that's really important to consider. Well, what about your kids or your grandkids or 7 generations from now? What do they get? Just throwing that out there, because it's just something that we really should be thinking about.
100%. We sometimes joke about, what if you can pick one superpower, what would that be? Some people pick the fly or like time travel. I always pick, I want to talk to every animals. I want to speak their language. I can, if I can have that superpower, you might run out of job, because I can just go to, hey, what's up? Tell me, are you gonna do you like those Ask trials? And so I don't have to have economical analysis with the stats and then figure out the trend lines. And
But you'd never know if that animal's lying or not.
Very true, I guess. Yeah.
See what humans do?
Yeah.
Hey, you could go to wild krats or krats creatures, and you can transform into whatever you want to, right?
Yeah, that's right. But that would be a fun superpower to have.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit down, talk to different critters, and 100%. And I'm just, is there anything else you want to cover on this thing? Because I kind of planned this. Really is again, this started in your office basically, and I just want to end this with you.
Well, I don't want it to end with me, but I think what you've brought up must conflict a lot of students that are graduating from an institution where they've learned all kinds of things about ecology and how the forest ecosystems work, at least the way we think they work. And then you hear things from professors at UBC like Fred Brunel that says, man, forestry isn't rocket science, it's more complicated than that. And so the students walk out of here, and then they've got a boss that they're working for that says, this is what I want, this is how many trucks need to go out, this is the set of mills that these things are going to. And so you come away from school, you've learned all these things, and maybe your minor was conservation and biology, and now you're going to a job where you're making big clear cuts, and you're going to lose a little bit of sleep at night maybe, and it's really hard to reconcile these things. So I think it's easy for me, and I worked at a sawmill for 3 years, and I worked as a logger for a while, but super easy for me to have an opinion and say the things I say. I mean, ultimately, my job is paid for through taxpayer dollars and students and all this, and much of that comes from the forest industry. So I'd like to see a vibrant forest industry as well, but at the same time, wouldn't we like to see our forests have really healthy sets of ecosystem services and stand dynamics and secondary stand structure and midterm timber supply, not just for us, but for our kids and grandkids and their kids and all the species that have to live in these forests after we punch a road in there and decide we're going to do what we're going to do. They're the ones that are left behind. So, but I would put it back to you, like, this is really tough for all of you young people that are learning all of these things, learning how ecosystems work, and then you go out there and you've got a job to do, and you're going to do the best job that you can.
I think
tough.
You're right. It is tough. And when I talk to new people who get into this role, I work for a consultant. I'm a supervisor. We have a lot of people who come in with very little forestry background, and I often say to them, or they'll reach a point where they realize that, the work that we're doing out there, laying out cut blocks, is we're exactly that. We're laying out cut blocks. These trees are going to be harvested. We're some of the last people who get to see this section of forest. And that can be very challenging for some people to come to terms with. And it's something I wrestled with for a little while as well. But for me, it's something I'm passionate enough about forestry, and I understand that, regardless if it's me doing it or someone else, the work's going to get done. I would rather it be done by me who's attempting to utilize what I'm learning here at UNBC, what I'm doing. I have that respect for the ecology and for the forest to try to implement these new and these best practices. But with that, it did very much come with the knowledge that industry will roll on, and as just like the research is going to roll on and everything, industry will roll on. It'll pivot, it'll come up with different ways of doing things, but it keeps moving forward. And I think showing that to students while they're still in school. They might get jobs as, layout technicians in the summer or whatnot, but I think another one of the most beneficial courses I took at UNBC was forestry, was it 403?
Operational forestry.
Operational
Planning.
forestry and planning, yeah, where, we get to see the entire process from the planning of a block to the harvesting, to the road building, to the mill itself, to the final product, the entire thing, because then I think it would help students have a better understanding when they step into these roles, when they're working for a licensee, what it is exactly they're a part of.
Yep.
Yeah.
When people start talking about environment, people typically stop talking about socioeconomic, and when people start emphasizing socioeconomic, people start talking about environment. Again, back to those OG way of talking about forestry. People only talk about, confirmation bias, right? People only talk about the things that they care, and then talk with people to share the same views. And then the whole time I'm doing this podcast, I'm just thinking about, okay, get it, we need to change, but how do we change? How can we have a robust forest sector, but while, still maintain those things that the people advocating for conservation care about? And then, so sounds like there are a couple pathways right now. A is we need to start use our secondary forest, that the plantation that we grow in the past. Liam Parfit, he's posting around, the barren clear cuts. Some of the trees that are 16-inch already, they're ready to be thinned, and they have to be thinned because thinning, I don't know if you agree, thinning helps ungulates, right? You open it a little bit so they're easier to travel. Some deciduous trees grow back and whatnot. That just in my brain, I'm just saying that. I made that up. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just looking at you. It's like, are you shaking your head or are you not?
I hope I wasn't doing either. No, I think I'm pretty optimistic about forestry. It's going to be different for your careers, and I think there's been a lot of progress in the last couple of decades. And we still got lots to learn about how to do some of this. And I think we don't want to make big assumptions without really learning about what the impacts are. So if we're going to, commercial thinning is an option, and it's certainly, we've got lots of candidate stands out there now.
Yeah.
But we really want to make sure we understand how we're doing it for multiple values. If we're doing it for restoration, or we have some of these other objectives, we want that to be real and not just saying that it's restoration if we don't really know. And so some of the work we're doing now is looking at that and collecting lots of pre-data in some of these stands, seeing news there, and then looking at what the response is post-harvest. So we need places like Research Forest who can do that, right?
Yeah. And then I heard a lot of researcher, they have this really fascinating ideas. They just don't have the funding to do it. And I don't know if you guys run into that. You have this question you want to ask, want to do this fascinating research project, but simply just no funding. And I just, if I were licensees, and because a morning of gravel, and that's $4,000. If you screwed up your road and you have to put gravels or put mats in there, that's tens of thousands of dollars. You use some of those and then go into research projects, that could help getting more people using scientific evidence to prove some of the points that we're advocating.
Yeah, it's challenging, right? It's challenging that's everywhere, and that's always that it's more difficult to find the tools to do the research. But don't, academic research is not the only kind of research. Companies do research that help improve their efficiencies and things too. You just have to think about why that is that. But, I think there's lots of ways to learn and collect information to do this. But I think it's also being really efficient at, back to what we said earlier about communicating that.
Yeah.
If everybody's doing a whole bunch of really cool research but nobody's talking about it, then it's nobody's really learning all that much, right?
Yeah, that's true. But back to the thinning topic, I guess what I want to say is, looking from examples around the world, looking from the European, Scandinavian models, they use every single piece in their land, and then the whole tree utilization, whatever the fancy word they want to call it. And we had guests coming from Sweden. They tell us they were shocked when they see the slash piles and stuff like that, and it's just, and I also heard opinions about because or at least around northern part of BC, our industry is very tailored to sawmill. We have the biggest sawmill, super efficient. So, but in sounds like in Northern Europe countries, they have really, fascinating pulp mills, which from a thin block, that's what you're gonna get for the first maybe one or second entries. You're just gonna get that really low grade volume, might be pulp, might be some other stuff, but we just don't have the industry structure to support that at this moment. It's very tailored to log in primate forests, and then using those high grade lumber and then ship them straight either down south or across the ocean. I don't know.
Yeah, but if you're thinking multiple values and biodiversity, be careful what you ask for, right? If every piece of fiber has a value, then none of it gets left on site.
Very true.
And there's an awful lot of European forests with really poor biodiversity ratings because they utilize olive fiber. They might not be clear cutting, but there's not a lot of life in those forests.
Yeah, I don't think there's a clear answer right now, but I think this forest landscape planning framework, where any type of mechanism can sit people down and then kind of, is force the right way to do it? Like kind of force you to have those tough conversations, having people to listen, both conservation people listen from the industry people listen to conservation people, at least a mechanism to sit them down and then kind of force you to talk to each other's. I'm all for it.
Well, in theory, that's what the new planning processes should do, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll see how. But it's a complex process, so it's going to be a complex planning process as well with people.
Right. That's right.
I need to talk about my cool new building before we wrap up today. Right?
100%. What is that cool building? Because as we were driving on, because I like to sit down right beside Roy and then just sit down in that old van without AC and kind of shoot the shit with him and kind of.
That's what you'll remember from field camp.
That's my biggest takeaway, that van. Why we don't have a school bus, by the way? We
don't know why. CNC has one, but yeah, I can't answer that.
That's false. I feel like we need to work together and then get UNBC a school bus.
I have the bus license, so if you need a driver.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so
Thanks,
you can
Ryan.
each August you can volunteer the last 2 weeks.
I'm
and
sure
drive
my
a
work
bus.
won't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Community engagement.
Yeah,
Good.
It's recorded. So
Another field camp student at field camp.
Because Brad was talking about we should find a way to maybe raise some money to help you out.
Yes, we should.
Yeah, in that building. So what is that building about, and then why did you build that?
The new building is basically taking the services we have at camp, which are pretty old, and putting them all in one building. So it'll be a building that can house 24 students and 2 instructors with a classroom and a commercial kitchen. And I know you really loved the bathroom facilities while you were there, but they'll be better than that. So it's really trying to upgrade and modernize. It's an off-grid building, right? So it's designed to be super efficient, and really it's a pretty high-tech building. Really, really well engineered to do that. So we started in September, broke ground, and we got the foundation work in before Christmas. Then we put it to bed, and we've just started back up now. And so we're still trying to raise money to finish. We're doing it in phases. So I'll take your bag of cash when we're done here and put it toward the building.
I give you all my student loan.
You just said you didn't have any. So. So we'll get it to lock up this summer. If we're successful at raising some more funds, we'll go further than that. So, but we'll hopefully get it in place in the next year or so, And basically, if you're coming in as a course, you'll be fully contained in that building.
That's awesome. I did not like the washroom facility that you have, by the way.
You didn't like it.
I did not like it.
You did not like it. Okay. That's clear.
I've been in better. I've been in worse.
It was all right. It was,
there's a roof on it.
Yeah.
It worked.
Hey, you know what? We pieced these things together over the years to sort of cater to our mostly students, but it's certainly showing its age. That's for sure. Our cabins are really old. The cabins are 80 or 90 years old.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
They were the first motel in Fort St. James.
They were in Fort St. James and moved out.
It was a motel.
Part of
a motel.
So they had a series of cabins, and so we've gotten some fantastic use out of that facility over the last 20 years or so. We put, particularly Lake Glasden, put some money into upgrading that. I mean, when we first bought it in 2002, there was no power, no running water, pretty rough, and so we've improved it, and it's worked well for us over the years. But we've outgrown it, honestly, and we needed something new. So this is the new project I've dove into.
That's awesome.
And not to put too fine of a point on it, but if there's any listeners out there with big wallets and they need a tax write-off, if we can generate, Dexter, let me ask you, if we can generate $1 million from this podcast, when you donate, say this came from Henda's podcast, we'll put a slide from the new building right down to Tezeron Lake. Would we? $1 million?
Is that what they want to buy? A slide into the lake?
Well, no, the slide won't be $1 million, but they got to donate $1 million.
How about a catapult? We can just
we could do that. There's the odd field camp student that we could probably get to volunteer for that. That's
sort of our target right now. We've the total cost of the building will be probably $3.5 million by the time we get it built. We've raised $2 million. So we're well underway to getting the first couple of phases done, but we're still trying to raise some extra dollars to get that finished.
So please donate now.
Where can we donate? They'll just come talk to you?
Not students. We're talking to listeners here. We don't need students donating.
They might have some leftover student assistance they can throw in there. Yeah.
But previous graduates, we can all, because we all appreciate all this experience.
We're going to have a bit of a funding drive. We've just actually gone through a process to get ourselves as a registered charity so we can issue tax receipts. Which would be a big help as well. So over the next little bit on our social media and hopefully a new website coming here soon, we'll have some information on some of that.
That's awesome. I've been thinking about everybody dream about if you win the lottery ticket, then what are you gonna do? For me, I was gonna split it into a couple of portions, but a big portion go to JPRF, big portion go to Eliza Lake, a big portion I was going to buy a land and then do some research on my own. Some of the, we don't have this, if you think about alternative silviculture system, we simply do not have a lot of research around this in the SBS, in the ESSF, in the BWS kind of areas. We have research done from the South in the States and then from the European countries, but locally generated research data that's suited to our ecosystem, I think we're a little bit lacking.
We are, but we're doing okay for pretty small. I mean, we have to remember, UNBC is a young school and a pretty small school, and so it takes a while to build up some of this capacity. It's not like, some institutions that's been around for hundreds of years and have all of those people that have come through and donate back to the institution, those sorts of things, right? So it takes time and it's a little more challenging, but we're getting there.
Yeah,
gotta be positive.
Yeah, I just want to. It is possible. I just wish I can.
I'll take however much you have. Like honestly, I've got a bag here you can fill up with all the cash you want to give me.
But I like that cabin anyway.
Do you accept crypto as well?
I'll figure out a way.
I really like that cabin. Like Ryan and I and Cooper and
Pat.
We're staying in cabin 3, so I don't know who else listening to this podcast right now might stay at cabin 3. Oh, we had a lot of fun in there. We're karaoke.
We don't need to know. You're going to break some of Uncle Roy's rules here if you
No rules
spill
broken.
No.
100% full.
Yeah.
Asleep at 10.
Yeah. Well, maybe 10:30.
There was one night 10:30, but
maybe being too loud, and then our neighbors was anyway. But it was a lot of fun. The whole field school experience was a lot of fun, and yeah, it is definitely the most memorable experience for me out of the UNBC. You know,
Good.
That's fantastic.
yeah, keep you thinking, keep everybody thinking, which is kind of important right now in forestry. Two standardized question, maybe just one. You know, if there's one policy in forestry you can create, amend, or remove, we ask everybody this question. So, you know, what would that be and why? Maybe let's start with Ryan. I never heard of.
Yeah, Ryan.
Yeah, you know, we have lots of talk, you know, on the table, but like off the record, you know, how we want the forestry to go. But, you know, just right now, do you have anything that's in your brain right now? Any policy to make, amend, change, to delete? Maybe I can start.
I was just going to say, the more I'm in the industry and the more I'm learning, it's the harder that question becomes to answer. I think there's a lot of little fixes and tweaks and operational things we can include from the research being done, but hands are tied for economic reasons, for political reasons, for XYZ. And I hazard to say, like, I'm cautious to say that allowing leniency in certain areas to practice new forestry methods, applying them on the landscape from a licensee perspective, would, like, giving them a little more license to implement some of these newer ideas or concepts or some sort of economic benefit that they get out of doing it, because research can clearly suggest that something's great for a forest. But if that doesn't generate money for the licensee, they don't have, aside from the social license, if it doesn't make them money at the end of the day, they're likely not going to do it, right? So if there was a way that we could better reward our industry for implementing research and for implementing newer strategies, that's what I would go with.
Cool.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. But if we wanted to be specific, I think we've made some good, you touched on it a bit there with, you know, we've gotten pretty good at taking current policy but changing practice within it with some pretty good results. And you know, there's some policy change required for sure, but that'll kind of catch up over time. I think the one, if I had to choose something really specific, it would be around free growing in our plantations. I think that's a real limitation to how we can design our best sort of planning, but then be held to a tree farming standard with the way we regenerate our cut blocks. So I think this will come, and I think there's already more flexibility than there's been. But I think we've got some development to go there in terms of improving our results on our blocks for those multiple values.
I think there's a silviculture working group to trying to develop 4 different pathways they can go forward. And I don't know too much to just say it off my brain, but like if people are interested, everything's online. Just search silviculture working group. There are 4 different things they're developing. Uncle Roy, before I get to you, I forgot to say this. You're actually the first one in the province to be that, what is that designation with FEBC?
Affiliated Forest Professional?
Yeah, can you just tell us a little bit briefly, how do you become the first one to get it in the province? That's quite something, hey? Or
Well, I probably just because I was the first one to apply.
Right.
I've been chatting with them for several years because I'm on a couple of working groups with some of the folks from Forest Professionals BC, and they've been talking about this designation, and I basically told them 4 or 5 years ago, well, when you get ready to do it, if you think it's something that I might fit into, I'll be your guinea pig. And so I can apply, and we can see how it works, and we can work through the kinks together. And I think basically there's no more rocket science to it than
No.
that. I just basically volunteered to try and go through the process. It was a fascinating process, and I appreciate being part of this thing, and I hope to be able to get on some committees and help do some of the things that we try and do at field camp
Yeah.
in terms of changing the way we think about forestry. Like you said earlier, I mean, my meme that I put together a couple years ago that I took a picture out at the John Prince with Dexter standing out there in this forest that they had done this partial harvesting, and I said, just please leave the forest in forestry. It's a simple ask. It's a simple meme. It's not going anywhere. It certainly hasn't become this internet thing, but I think it's just a pretty simple way to think about it. If you leave the forest in forestry, you're not leaving a clear cut that needs to be planted with Class A seed stock into rows of corn that are pine trees. You've actually left the forest behind. And as foresters, I think foresters got into forestry because they love forests, not necessarily because they love crops of trees. They love the forest. And so if you can do what Jerry Franklin said many years ago, what matters is not just what you take, but also what you leave behind, then just leave some stuff behind, right? And I guess that's kind of related to what I would say too, Henda. I don't have any specific policy. I'm not a policy analyst, but I, as part of the association, I'm aware of, the codes and standards of ethical and professional conduct. And I would say that maybe an important thing to do would be to, whatever the decision that you're making in forestry, to always make it against the backdrop of Bylaw 9, Schedule A, Standard 6B. Do you remember what that is?
Please remind me.
Oh, good reply. Well, it's actually kind of related to what one of the very first foresters in North America said many years ago, Aldo Leopold. He said, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community, and it's wrong when it tends otherwise. So if you think about that and you really think about each word, if the right thing to do leaves behind the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community, and if it doesn't, it's the wrong thing to do. This was a forester that said it. Interestingly enough, this Bylaw 9, Schedule A, Standard 6B sounds very much like that, and it says, uphold forest stewardship and practice the responsible use of forest resources based on an ecological understanding at the stand, forest, and landscape level, which maintains and protects ecosystem function, integrity, and resilience. So I guess I would say, if there was anything that I could change, is just change anybody in the province that is managing forest to always manage it against the backdrop of what Aldo Leopold or what your codes and standards of ethical and professional conduct say. And that's make sure that you're maintaining the function, integrity, and resilience of these ecosystems. There's ways you can do that, and there's obviously ways that aren't doing that. So make sure you're doing it. It's part of your ethics.
Such a strong statement, such a strong message. And I don't know if people notice, but there's a magazine for FPPC, and Roy is an active writer, and then pretty much once in a while we'll write a couple articles and get published on the FPPC magazine. And I think students can also read that magazine as well. It's just if you're into forestry and then wondering what future forestry can go, and then that's a really good place to just to see what people are talking about. And Roy has been posting. I've been reading every single one of them. And
glad somebody's reading.
Yeah, and I just really want to appreciate, like this. I say this. I really want to appreciate all your passion into teaching and to helping students, success in school, and then also helping forestry students to expose them to very important other perspectives that they need to think about. And then we need more people in the province to do that as well. So it's just a big shout out and thank you to Roy.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate Dexter, who has helped me kind of become, yeah, because we've worked so close together over the years. Like, I learned so much from him. I have these ideas, they're applying things, we're talking, we're writing papers together, and then to hear good feedback from you guys makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, and this is really a mutualist relationship we had at UNBC between teachers and professor educators and students in the forestry family here. So, yeah, this is. I don't know if this is going to be the last episode, but I really hope not. But I really hope somebody else can pick it up and just
come on,
keep
Jack. Pick it up, Jack.
Jack. But yeah, I definitely will help out for whatever, from early planning to post-production editing, and we just hope another student can sit here and then just keep the conversation going. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Great.
Is there anything else? Anybody want to say anything else before I wrap this up, maybe?
No, just a shout out to you and you guys for taking the initiative to do this and pull together some voices. I think that's really important, and it's good leadership within your peer group to show that you can have an impact in different ways. So well done.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you. I gotta say a special thanks to Henda as well for running this. It's meant a lot to a lot of the students as well. I used to work for Henda. He was my supervisor. And one of the biggest messages I remember, he sat all of us down in a room before the season began, and the message that he emphasized to us was communication is key. And I'm glad to see that it's something that he's carried through his academic career as well. And for all of you listeners, when you're getting out there into the field, when you're doing school, if you have questions, ask them. If there's people you want to talk to them. Communication is the most important thing you will do in your academic career, in your actual career, in life in general. So take Henda's message to heart. Communication is key.
Cheers.
Thanks. Oh, wow. Huge race for you. Just kidding. All right. I may say this for the last time. Hopefully not, but I just want to thank everybody. Thank Roy, Dexter, Ryan for coming for this one. It means a lot. And I also want to give C4 Radio a very last shout out as well. Without this facility and, this podcast won't happen. So huge shout out to C4 Radio Station for helping us out. So that wraps up, perhaps, possibly, maybe, could be, the very last episode of this podcast. We thank you for tuning in and spending time listening to us chit-chat about nature, BC forestry, and life at UNBC. UNBC Forestry Club Podcast is a student-led podcast sponsored by absolutely nobody but a bunch of students who are passionate about forestry, the outdoors, and adventures. New episodes hopefully keep dropping every week. So maybe stay tuned for more insightful conversation and inspiring stories. Until next time, let's continue to grow together, rooted in our love for the forest. Have a great week and have a great summer and have a great career in front of you and have a great teaching and everything. And I really appreciate for all the supports and comments we received doing this project. And hopefully we'll see everybody in the future. And from the bottom of my heart, thank everybody for listening. And thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.